Hi, my name is Dr. Christy Mulkey, and I'm the workshop coordinator with 240 Tutoring. We've been getting a ton of questions from our TExES users about the new early childhood pre-K through 3 exam. And do we have materials for it? Do we know anything about it? So we're here today to answer those questions for you. So let's jump right in. I'm going to share my screen with you so that you can follow along. So you should be seeing my PowerPoint. All right, now we're going to be looking at, again, the TExES Early Childhood Pre-K through 3 exam, and we're going to give you some highlights of what you need to know. We've had some time to take a deep dive into the released information and preparation manual about this new exam, and we thought it'd be helpful to share our findings with you while we're still developing our comprehensive study guide. So our study guide's coming soon. We are working on it, I promise you, but we want to try to answer your questions. So we're going to give you some highlights and some key things to know today. All right, so first of all, what is it? This is a new content exam to support the pre-K through 3 certification. So it's a new content exam, and they're calling it content, which we're going to talk about in just a minute, but this is for the pre-K through 3 certification. This is going to be available January of 2021. So in a few months, this will be available. Let me note, this does not, I'm going to say it again, does not replace the EC through 6 exam. It's a new additional option. So you can choose to be certified EC through 6 or EC through 3, basically. So it does not replace the EC through 6, nor does it replace the Science of Teaching reading test. We've gotten that question too. If you want more information about who has to take the Science of Teaching reading test, please go check out our video on our Facebook page or on our YouTube channel that says STR, Science of Teaching Reading Exam. And you can see all about that exam and how it works with this new early childhood pre-K through 3 certification. Now, don't be fooled. The state is calling this a content test, like they call the EC through 6 a content test. But guys, this is a pedagogy exam. Do not be fooled. It's a pedagogy exam, y'all. There will be very little true content, if any, tested from what we can see. Now, I'm going to show you an example question at the end to make my point, let you practice. So in our opinion, you're going to be taking two pedagogy exams, this pre-K through 3 and the PPR. Now, I want to note this because if you are in an alternative certification program, if you're in an ACP, sometimes you get a lot of coursework and support in the content and less in the pedagogy, because a lot of you are doing internships and it's assumed you're learning that pedagogy in the field. This can be very stressful, especially if you haven't had a lot of pedagogy yet. So you may have to spend some real time in preparation for this test because it's heavy on pedagogy. Now, what is the test structure? So let's see what this test looks like. Number of questions. The first part is 90 selected response questions. So where you choose A, B, C, or D, selected response, 90 of those, and 1 constructed response question. Now you're thinking, 1 constructed response. That's not so bad. We'll talk about it in just a minute. Constructed response means you're actually going to have to write. You're going to have to write. It's an essay, but it's not like a narrative. This is constructed response to answer a question. You're going to have a total time limit of 5 hours, which breaks down into 4 hours and 45 minutes of testing time with a 15-minute tutorial. So you'll have just under 5 hours for 90 questions and 1 constructed response. Now let's break that down even further. So if we look at the domains, we have 6 domains here. The first one, child development, is 19% of your test. So approximately 21 of those selected response questions will have to do with child development. How does the child develop? Then you're going to have the instructional setting. How do we set up that instructional setting for pre-K through 3 students? That's going to be 12% of your test. And so approximately 14 questions. Then you have educating all learners. That's going to include so many things about diverse students and how do you educate them. And that is going to be 12% of your test. And again, approximately 14 questions. Domain 4 is on data-driven practice and formal and informal assessment. If you know anything about quality early childhood instruction and assessment, a lot of it occurs informally. So there's going to be that combination of formal and informal assessment and using data that you gather through that assessment to inform your instructional practice. Again, 12% of your test, about 14 questions. Then you have learning across the curriculum, and you're like, hey, curriculum, there's my content. And yes, it's 28%, 25% of my test, 28 questions. Okay, this is misleading. It says curriculum, that does not mean content. Notice what it says, learning across the curriculum. So we're not just looking at what is the science curriculum, what is the math curriculum, can I do the science, can I answer the math questions? It's how do kids learn across that curriculum? So how do they learn math? How do they learn science? That is critical. So it's not just covering content, but it's going to be how do you teach that content? All right. So if you're looking at the selected response, and you're probably thinking, Dr. Mulkey, I think your math skills are lacking. That does not add up to 90. But if you take these percentages, you can't come up with something that adds exactly to 90. So one of these is going to have one less. If you add these up, this actually adds to 91. So one of these will have one less. Notice if we rank these by weight, this would be first. Your constructed response would be second. That's a little scary for some of you who are struggling writers. Up here, child development will be third. So if you don't know things about Piaget and Erikson and how does that look and work, you need to ramp up your study in that area. And then all three of these are ranked the same. So we would be fourth. My pen just decided to stop working. Fourth through sixth. So you can kind of see how this test is weighted. And we're going to come back to that constructed response, I promise. But I want to take a close look at this right here, this learning across the curriculum. And what does it mean when I'm going to be assessed on how to teach content? So let's take a look. Domain 4. There are several of descriptive statements under that domain. So you know how it'll give you the domain and the competency, and then there's all those descriptive statements. 6 of those, to be exact, in this domain mention the knowledge of the TExES pre-kindergarten guidelines and the TExES or the TExES. So you are going to have to spend considerable time in these two documents, and understand what each grade level is expected to do and know. So I'm going to say that again. You need to know what each grade level is expected to do and know. Notice something. You need to go through grade 5, not grade 3. And you're thinking, I'm getting certified in pre-K through grade 3. Why do I need to know the TExES or the TExES for grades 4 and 5? Probable reason for this. Now, I can't see into the minds of the creator, but I'm basing it on experience. I would say this. You need to know where your kids are going, grades 4 and 5, so that you can ensure your teaching is aligned and preparing them for that. That you're not going too far, but you're going far enough to prepare them for the next grade levels. Also, you may have students who are working above grade level. And I'm not even going to say may, I'm going to say probably have students who are working above grade level that may need more challenging activities, instruction, and assessment, which then it's helpful to know the 4th and 5th grade TExES. So you need to spend time in these two documents, the TExES pre-kindergarten guidelines and the TExES for kindergarten through grade 5. Now, when you look those up, you can look them up by grade level and read all of kindergarten, ELAR, math, science, social studies. Or you can look at ELAR, kindergarten, 1st, 2nd, and 3rd, and 4th, all on one big giant HTML page. But you need to be familiar with those. We need to know what are students expected to do and to know in those grade levels and subjects. Now, let's look at an example question. So here's a released question that's in the preparation manual. It says, which of the following, and we're still in domain 4, by the way, that learning across the curriculum, which of the following experiences would best support first grade students in developing an understanding of the life cycle of animals? A, researching high interest animals and comparing animals' resemblance to their offspring. B, going on an outdoor investigation to identify animals in their habitats and discuss how the habitats provide food and shelter. C, reading illustrated books about butterflies migrating south during winter months to ensure survival. And D, observing and recording observations of a tadpole hatching and metamorphosing into a frog. All right, so let's take this question apart. Now, the first thing I want you to notice is we are talking about first grade students. What's going to be critical in this test is always looking at the grade level. In fact, this is critical on the PPR. It's critical on the EC through 6. Always look at the grade level. If they give you a grade level, you're going to have to start considering what's developmentally appropriate. Okay? So notice that this question addresses first grade. Now, you're probably looking at this and going, well, this kind of is a content question. Not directly. It is a pedagogical question on how to teach science. So when we first look at this, we think, ooh, this is a science question. But it's not asking you to answer a question about life cycles. It's not. It's asking you how to teach this. But you're going to need to know some of the content terms to make the right choice. So let's take a look at that vocabulary that you need to understand so that you can answer the pedagogy part of the question. So we have life cycle, resemblance, habitats, survival, metamorphosing or metamorphosis. So those are all science words you need to know, even though it didn't ask you directly what that science content means. Okay, but we need to know those words. So you need to know the science content, but you're going to have to know how to teach it. Again, learning across the curriculum. So let's go ahead and evaluate this question so I don't leave you hanging any longer. Some of you are like, just give me the answer. All right. So if we take a look at the activity in each answer choice, you see researching, going on an outdoor investigation, reading, and observing and recording. Now I want you to think about first grade. Think about what would be most developmentally appropriate for that age group. Hopefully you rule out researching because we're talking about first grade. You may even be thinking reading. We might have to have them read to us because we're not proficient readers, especially in nonfiction text for first graders. But I also want to point out something here. We have two options right here and right here that are much more inquiry-based, where the students are exploring and really engaging in the learning. That inquiry-based learning is almost always going to be a right answer. Almost always going to be a right answer. So we've got two inquiry-based that we should be able to narrow this down to. So we've got two that we know would be better choices for teaching science, especially. And then we got two that may not be even developmentally appropriate for that first grade. All right, now I'm getting to the answer, I promise. Here, we know the inquiry's best, so we've got it down to B and D. But over here, this is talking about identifying habitats and discussing habitats. The question was asking us about life cycles. So D is not only correct because it's inquiry, observing and recording, but it also, we're talking about metamorphosis, that is life cycle. So D is double correct. All right, so you've got to know these terms. Now, to give you some science background here, A is looking at genetics because resemblance of the offspring. B and C are both about survival and evolution. So those don't relate to life cycle at all. But you can see here, what I want you to know, that science content is embedded in a pedagogy question. So don't just expect to know what is metamorphosis, what is the commutative property of addition, what is phonemic awareness. You're actually going to have to answer questions that take that content and put it in a teaching situation. So pedagogy test, I'm telling you guys, pedagogy test. All right, now let's talk about that constructed response. Some of you, ever since I said constructed response at the beginning, you have been like, oh, I need to hear about this constructed response. The writing scares me. And you are going to have to write. This is domain 6. And so you really have to understand this is 20% of your score. If you bomb this, you're going to have to do extremely well or near perfect on the selected response. So you can't afford to just not do well at all on this constructed response because it's 20% of your score. So let's talk about what this is going to look like. You're going to be given some student data. So the first thing you're going to have to do is read and analyze that student data. And the first thing you're going to be asked to do is identify a weakness. So based on that data, what is a weakness for that student? Okay. Once you identify that weakness, you're going to be asked to identify what do you do about it. So I know that here's the weakness. What am I going to do as the teacher to improve that weakness? And then I've got to justify my answer. Why is what I chose the most effective for this weakness, for this issue? So you've got to justify why you chose what you did. And then describe the informal assessment to monitor the issue's improvement. So what are all the informal things I'm going to do? So not a test or a quiz or a paper, pencil, something they have to do, is going to be informally. What am I going to do to watch that student? What am I going to do when I question and talk to that student, when I observe that student? What are all the informal assessment things I'm going to do to monitor and make sure that student's weakness is improving? And then lastly, here's the fun one. Describe a cross-curricular. Now, if you don't know what cross-curricular means across subjects. So even though this weakness might be in math, I'm going to have to describe a cross-curricular activity to support the issue's improvement. So how do I improve this weakness in an activity that crosses curriculum? So if I've got a weakness in math or a weakness in reading, let's say I have the student was struggling with reading and vocabulary. Well, let's talk about what can I do in science to support improvement on that weakness. So here are the things that you're going to have to do in that constructed response. Now, here's what we recommend, that you spend 1 hour on the CRQ. All right. So not quite a fourth of your time. And that you respond in 5 paragraphs. And you might be thinking, what needs to go in my paragraphs? Tell me. I'm going to tell you. In our study guide, which we are working on, I promise we are working on, we're going to get it out as quick as we can, but we will provide tips and a breakdown of what you should include in each paragraph, and then overall steps you should follow. And here's a good one, an example. We're going to give you an example. Note that your response will be scored on a rubric with a scale of 1 to 4. We do know that. We know the rubric is going to be 1 to 4. Now, grammar is not specifically listed on the grading rubric. It's not, but you should keep it in mind as you write. Now, let me tell you, I've taught college for years, and students would say, well, how big a deal is the grammar? Here's what I'm going to tell you. If the grammar mistakes are so many that it distracts me from the content and I can't figure out what the writer is trying to tell me, it's not going to score well. So the occasional grammar error is okay. But if you have so many that I can't follow your content and what you're trying to say, if you don't break your writing into paragraphs, if you don't have punctuation, if the spelling is so bad I can't tell what word you intended to put there, then that's going to impact how you score on the rubric, even though grammar is not specifically stated on the rubric. Okay? So stay tuned. We're going to be doing live sessions. If you haven't joined me for Tuesday lives in our TExES Facebook group, join me. Tuesday, we're going to be doing some live questions with the released practice questions. Now, in the preparation manual, they gave us 50 released questions, but they only gave you feedback and explanations for 25 of those. So we're going to take the other 25 and we're going to provide feedback on those that they did not give you any feedback on. Our comprehensive study guide in 240 Tutoring will be released this fall. So if you're already purchasing that for PPR or Science of Teaching Reading, our study guide for pre-K through 3 is coming this fall. So just be looking for announcements. Be looking for announcements. If you don't already, follow us on social media. We are on Facebook and we have test specific groups. So if you're looking for those live videos, it's in they are in our TExES group. All right. Those should be capital E's technically. All right. They're in our TExES group. Go check us out on Facebook. We also have videos on YouTube and Instagram that you can follow. If you have any questions, you can email us at workshops@240tutoring.com, or you can drop them in the comments. Every Wednesday, I do office hours for our TExES Facebook group. So if you put questions on this video, because this is where we're going to post it, right here in our TExES group, I will come to those questions during my office hours on Wednesday, and I will try to answer those, as many of them as possible. Of course, you can check out our free resources right here at 240tutoring.com/resources and our study guides. So I hope this has been helpful. Stay tuned for our study guide. We are here to help you. Again, I'm Dr. Christy Mulkey with 240 Tutoring.